Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're going to take a look at the Vermont. I love playing this ship. We're going to have a little therapy session with our friend the Brick here. We want dev strikes, we want big hits on broadside ships. That's really the goal of playing a ship like this one. 40-second reload, you have to make the shots count. And that includes leading properly. Thought I'd throw this in here just to show you guys, when you don't play Brick for a while, you do lose out on your lead times just a little bit. I've been playing a lot of those new battle cruisers, of course. That was a couple weeks ago, though. But I did start playing some of the super battleships again last week, and it didn't go well. That's probably why you're not seeing them on the channel. It went so poorly that we needed a bit of a Brick healing session, and that's what we're going to get today. So Vermont, of course, 457mm guns, but actually good ones. And yeah, they just kind of citadel things when they're broadside. It's very, very nice to have. This ship is also just ridiculously well concealed now and has some pretty decent maneuverability thanks to the buffs it received a little while ago now. So you can actually play pretty aggressive like this. It's nice to have that option to be able to go dark and turn out when needed. It's one of the main reasons I enjoy Brick these days over even a Montana, although Monty's still very, very good. 12-kilometer detect is just ridiculous for a battleship, especially one as good as this one. It just allows you to play so many more aggressive positions and not get punished for it, because there are times where you're going to have to turn away. Montana here again, just sailing broadside on, and I'm still not quite leading enough, actually. So it takes a little bit in this game for me to get used to this ship again. A little too far back on that one. Still did pretty decent damage, I would say, but we're getting focused a little bit more. So it is time to turn away, I think. Fast cooldown heals here on the Vermont as well, much like the Ohio, Massachusetts, which is really, really nice to have. We also have a decent damage control here. When buffed, we get over 30 seconds of immunity time. So that's more than enough to let us go dark using our concealment here, and we're not going to get lit on fire again by some blind shots, that kind of thing, to get us lit here. So this turnout, even though we're basically at the cap here, we're not detected for this turnout. It's just pretty crazy. Not a lot of battleships are capable of doing that, and a very nice reason that Vermont typically plays pretty well these days. It just can get a little bit closer to people, like this, a broadside thunder, 11.5 kilometers. Surely, guys, surely it's gonna be good, right? And it is! And it is! Triple sit, we nearly take him out 100% to 0. Would have been nice to have that full dev strike, that would have been insane. But hey, that's a good start to this Brick healing session today. This is the first video I'll be making this week, so nice way to dip my toes back into the water here and remind myself that yes, all is right in the world. Broadsides do get punished in this video game, especially at these mid to close ranges. Skipping ahead a little bit though, we are patient with the Vermont, of course. We don't want to be just firing on cooldown with our reload. Even though it's a long reload, we gotta make these shots count. The same Thunder is back, also broadside again, and unfortunately for this guy, I've learned how to lead now again. That Monty got away with it a little bit earlier on. Yeah, this poor guy did not, so that's 2 salvos to kill a Thunderer outright, which always feels really, really, really nice. The reload, though, is a problem because this Stalingrad is now broadside. That's the key here, where Vermont can be a little bit worse than some of the other battleships. There are just going to be some games where people just walk out broadside to you so often that your reload is a bit of a nuisance. This is where things like Republic reload would be really nice to have. Although questionable if that thing would actually hit properly. But here, broadside Stalin. He tries the slow down turnout, which actually works for our first turret. But our second turret does manage to clip him there. But that is a way to take advantage of this rather poor aiming system if you're in a cruiser or any ship caught broadside. If you do slow down and turn out as people are shooting at you, the aiming system just can't compensate for that. It assumes the player is just going to continue in a straight line, whatever their trajectory is, without turning or making a change to their speed. So that's why shells land short all the time. It's the auto aim, the aim assist, trying to help you out there. We do manage a double sit though with our back turret, best turret there on the poor Spanish cruiser. Those are fun cruisers to play, but especially that tier 9 has a gigantic citadel, so very difficult to deal with when you're flat broadside, or pinched, I guess, by a bunch of battleships with that thing. Now, we're going to get rushed by Adelmi here, but his torps are just slow enough, and the maneuverability on Vermont is just ridiculous. So we actually are perfectly angled to the torps, even though we launched them at like 3 kilometers. Kind of silly stuff. And we do get our back turrets into this guy. We wait just enough time that he's not too angled, and there's a 50 millimeter plate there I believe we could have bounced off of, so important not to hit that, and we get some decent damage in. And that's going to do it for this first game, actually. We got 8 citadels in the Vermont. Always feels nice. Nearly getting a couple of dev strikes there. Just a little too low on the HP on some of these ships. But hey, that first salvo into that Thunderer was just beautiful. Cathartic, even. Now, we're not done quite yet, although it isn't a Vermont this time. It's a Montana. Since we did so well in the Vermont in that last game, some people wanted to see what the Montana looked like in comparison. So these games actually happened back to back is when I played them. I was feeling pretty good. So we're going to play Monty a little bit more aggressively than I might normally play it. We're going to be pushing bow in towards the cap that the enemy team already owns. And fortunately, getting pretty lucky here into this bow on Des Moines. We got ourselves a bit of a weird fight here, honestly. It's why I'm shooting the enemy Des Moines, even though he's bow on, and that's not a very high percentage shot. It's pretty lucky that we got a Citadel there, honestly. Whoever wins this DM engagement really is probably going to control this cap zone for the most part, so I do want to help my teammates win this fight, and I think we actually get him here. Yeah, pretty decent damage, especially that first salvo in. And you'll notice our Des Moines actually just barely dodged that Bourgogne salvo, who went to the flank very, very quickly and is using armored piercing, which is terrifying, honestly. Typically, when you're seeing a Bourgogne, they're going to stay in spawn, they're going to spam HE at you, and they're going to collect their 180,000 damage to leaderboard, and it's not that big of a deal. But a Bourgogne probably using his engine boost to get out there that quickly, and shooting armor piercing against all these broadside targets he's getting, yeah, that guy's gonna have a lot more battle impact and is much more dangerous. So fortunately, our Des Moines, I think, even had the legendary upgrade, which increases the acceleration of the ship, which I think let him live there. So we're gonna get a decent control over this cap zone, but I can't stay here. Similar position to what we got into with the Vermont, don't you think? We have to turn away, and this is a situation where the Vermont would not be detected and the Montana will be. That's kind of the tricky part about playing a Montana after playing a Vermont. You don't have that fast cooldown heal, you don't have the concealment. The concealment is a really big deal in situations like this. If we were to damage control this fire, we still have that 30-second immunity time if we're buffing up our damage control, but we don't have that concealment to turn away, so we do have to play a little further back, and we only have 406s. You notice we don't actually get a Citadel that time on the Thunderer. And we get very, very lucky to not eat a massive hit from this Bourgogne on the flank. It's really what I was terrified of. We do manage to go dark here now, and we will use our damage control, but you'll notice that we didn't go dark as quickly. Before we started our turn, they were still just close enough, and you'll notice that Thunder is actually pushing in again. So had that DD been there, or the Thunder a little closer, this could have gone much poorer for us. The advantage, though, to Montana is it's got a better hull than the Vermont. It doesn't take as much damage, and the heals are beefier. You'll notice that in the bottom left there, I have a mod that tells me how much healing I get. It's 23,500 HP per heal, and we get 5 of those. Vermont does not get that much. So over a long game, which this one might be, you do get a little bit more healing and tankiness out of a Montana. It's just not as good as dealing with the burst damage that typically comes out when you play a little too aggressive like we did earlier, and we don't have that amazing concealment to get away from things. But we still have the damage output. Montana and Vermont guns are different, but against broadsides they are similarly punishing. I won't say equally, but similarly punishing. We get some nice hits there, as we saw into that Bourgogne. That one was a little less good, but that initial one was like over 20k, which feels great against a lot of those French battleships. They have turtleback, they have spaced armor, so you can get a lot of shatters and non-pens, but this time we didn't, which feels great. And you'll notice that even though we are kiting away here, we have done a decent job of getting control over this cap, at least as a team, even though we don't have very many of us here. It's a really big deal to be stalling out or even slightly winning on the weak flank. For a Montana, you can be a really good anchor for that. This is really where the Monty shines. It can push, and as a battleship, you can push with these things. Montana is probably one of the better ones for it, since it is so tanky. But you do want to be making these fighting retreats in a Montana. This is where I find this ship to be just beautiful, because you are kind of baiting people into crossfires. You'll notice our GK is pushing mid, which is going to work in this game since the enemy team is so spread out, and that crossfire is going to be amazing for us. Montana, of course, not having that overmatch does hurt it a little bit compared to the Vermont, but realistically, we're looking for broadside shots anyway, so it's not as big of a deal, I find. We do manage to get to another heal here, but we are pretty low on HP. And back turrets, best turrets. I don't know if we were the reason that that guy turned out, or the GK, or maybe he was creeping up on the Des Moines there and didn't want to stay bow in, but I will take it. Back turrets, getting that kind of dispersion was very nice. Especially when we can see... Actually, this one's okay. But Monty can be a little bit of a shotgun at times. This one's all right. And in fact, it's great because we got 2 Citadels there. But you'll notice it's not that amazing dispersion like we saw on the Venezia all the time. But we're getting up there with Citadels again. We already have 6 Citadels, which feels great, and almost 200,000 damage. Always a good time when you're playing a battleship and you're getting these punishing salvos. And you'll notice that typically, outside of that Des Moines early on, typically they're against broadsides. I think that has a lot to do with the positioning we're able to take in these games, a little more aggressive than I typically would be playing, because the enemy sub was on the other flank and I didn't have to deal with a carrier. You'll notice I did take some time to talk about concealment, turning out, playing aggressive, but eventually you have to make that turn away when you play that aggressively, and that's why I talked about Vermont being a little more comfy with its concealment. Well, that all goes out the window the instant there's a carrier able to spot you at will. So that's where we are getting these better games, I think, when we're not in a carrier match, that we can play a little more aggressive, put a little more pressure on enemy cruisers and battleships, and force them to make mistakes, getting ourselves a lot more broadside salvos. It's much harder in a carrier game, I find. So that's why you're going to not see these kind of games happen as much in a CV game. For me personally, I just find I can't play where I would like to because I'm just going to get focused out and killed rather quickly. So I'm going to play differently. And that typically means farther away, less flanking, more clumped up as a team, and people are of course going to angle to where teammates are. So 4 kills, 233,000 damage in this one, a nice little Montana therapy session. And Boggsy is the last one remaining. Unfortunately, in a Kronstadt, he had a bit of a rough team in this one. And the overmatch, oh my goodness. Vermont's going to do that to ships with 30 millimeters of armor, but anything with 27 millimeters or less, Monty can do some pretty nasty things. Pretty disgusting levels of overmatch there, honestly. Don't quite manage to get the Kraken, but that's okay. We want legitimate Krakens here. Someone was saying, just give PQ his Kraken. No, we want legitimate ones. I'm good with teammates finishing people off. That is just fine. It's still a really, really nice game. We did smack some broadsides in this one, and we used overmatch. I would personally prefer those overmatch things be toned down a bit to gain that consistency like we saw in this video against broadside ships. I find it just way more satisfying. As for the build here on these ships, they're pretty similar. It is just going to be a very basic battleship build. We will have some new builds to look at if the proposed commander changes come. There's some things to do with Furious coming, super heavy APs getting some changes, improved repair parties will get some changes, so we'll see if these builds change. But for now, we're always basically going with Adrenaline Rush, basic survivability, extra heals, concealment, fire prevention. It's basically set in stone for these battleships these days. I take Grease the Gears here because the turret traverse isn't amazing on these ships, but Vermont especially loves Brisk. So depending on how you're feeling, if you're okay with the turret traverse, Brisk is an amazing skill. If you play a little further back than I do, you'll get much more value out of Brisk. But if you have a tendency to over-push, let's be honest, I do often over-push and just find myself dead, Grease the Gears can help in those close quarter situations. And then I am taking Emergency Repair Specialist, simply because I don't really know what to take here. Sometimes it'll be Preventive Maintenance, sometimes I'll think Gun Feeder, I don't know. This Consumable Specialist isn't really worth it because it's not helping your healing. Those consumables, not as important on a Vermont. And the other upgrades look like this. I really enjoy cross maps, so you'll notice the extra range here. Our accuracy on American battleships comes from the 6th slot, so we can afford to take other things in our 3rd slot here. And no propulsion mod because it isn't available. It's kind of baked in on Vermont, much like we see on some of those British cruisers and destroyers. And yeah, full concealment, of course, because 12.6 is disgusting with these guns. I bring it up mostly compared to Hindenburg. Let me see. Hopefully he has concealment. Yeah. 12.6, guys. Same as Hindenburg. And it overmatches Hindenburg everywhere. It's just... I would like to see this changed, actually. That's just too much, in my opinion. Montana is 14 kilometers, as we can see, and the build looks pretty similar. Although it does have gun feeder, since I am swapping to the HE a little bit more. Thanks to all that bungo experience a couple weeks ago, I am shooting more HE out of my battleships. I'm finding myself getting a little bit less frustrated because I'm not just forcing AP through all the time. But that said, Montana AP is much, much better than bungo AP into angled ships and superstructures. You can do massive damage to superstructures with a Montana, where bungo just didn't really do that, so that's where the HE came from. The HE, though, is still pretty good on Monty, but we are still going range again. I just love cross maps. I didn't really showcase that in this game, but there are times where there's a broadside cruiser across the map sitting on an island thinking they're safe, and then we just smack them from orbit. It's rather enjoyable, but not always the most beneficial, so I can see you running something else as well. But that's going to do it. A little therapy session here, mostly with the brick to begin with, but hey, Monty pulled its weight too. A lot of citadels in this one. Crushing broadsides always feels good. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.